I'd like to welcome everybody here. In the back, can you hear me okay in the back? Okay. We're getting settled So I'll go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Kelly Ball. I'm the chapter leader of Women for Kansas here in Lawrence, Douglas County. Women for Kansas has 10 chapters across our state, including one virtual chapter. The virtual chapter actually has a program tomorrow at 2 on the future of clean energy. And that would be an excellent program to do. You can go to our website, womenforkansas.org, if you'd like to look that up and register to join that. Today's program will be live streamed. Will Haynes with the Watkins is providing that service for us, and we just want to caution everybody about the extension cord. And it will also be recorded and saved on the YouTube channel here at Watkins and also on the Women for Kansas website. It will be on the Facebook page of Watkins for 30 days, but it will be preserved on the YouTube channel. I'd like everyone to welcome, I see a legislator here, Senator Marcy Francisco is joining us today. We're very happy to see a representative show up in public. So I'll just go over a little bit of information about Women for Kansas. It was started back during the Brownback era, and the mission was to restore integrity, fiscal responsibility, and balance to Kansas by electing moderate candidates who would uphold our legislative priorities. And our legislative priorities continue to need defending. They include a fair, progressive tax system that adequately funds public services, a court system free from political influence, equal rights for all, reproductive rights and bodily autonomy, separation of church and state, advocacy of healthcare as a human right, stronger laws to prevent gun violence, preservation of excellence in schools, public schools and higher education, recognition of and support for the arts as vital to our quality of life, and protection of our environment against and ecosystems against avoidable degradation. So if those priorities align with you, if you haven't joined us already, I invite you to join Women for Kansas. We have a sign-up sheet over there just to look at, including, my husband's there for commentary. We encourage people to sign up just so we have an idea of how many are in attendance. If you'd like to give your email, then you can also receive our free weekly newsletter news you can use online. Okay. So again, you can become a dues-paying member at going to womenforkansas.org. We have a YouTube channel that has past programs that are saved there. We had an excellent program in May with Nicole Revenaugh giving us a program on looking at the constitutional amendment being proposed for next year about how we select versus elect our Supreme Court justices. So I encourage you to look those things up. We'll also be having future forums. Welcome. We'll be having future forums on school board candidates and city commission races. And if you have ideas and interests in a program, just contact me, because that's what we want to do. We want to inform our public and encourage women to be involved in politics, encourage everyone to be involved in politics, and defending our priorities. So over at the table, my husband Brad Wall is our table guest over there, and we do have the sign-up sheet. We have some bumper stickers and the Arc of Justice little pink cards. If you aren't aware, it's a local online weekly publication listing all of the activist activities happening in Lawrence and our area. So I encourage you to look at those. And I have contact information for our legislators, free postcards, and some free postcards from Spencer Museum of Art, as well as brochures from Humanities Kansas available, so don't forget to look over there. So I'll get right to introduction of our panelists. We're very honored to have these panelists join us today, take the time out of their busy schedules. To my left, we have Steve Nowak. He's the Executive Director of the Douglas County Historical Society in Watkins here since March 2011. And he oversees many things, as he's involved with nearly everything at the Watkins, from finance and building preservation to exhibits and programs to everyday listening. The part of his job he likes most is community outreach, such as this, giving behind-the-scenes tours, talking with community groups, working with students, and establishing partnerships with the great people and organizations of our community. Steve has over 30 years experience in museum work and a background in art, history, and material culture, and he is a graduate of Washington University of St. Louis. Please help me welcome Steve Nowak. And we have Carol Smith, the Dean of Libraries at the University of Kansas. She previously served as University Librarian at Colorado School of Mines in Golden, Colorado, Library Director of Adams State University, and Associate Librarian at the University of Central Missouri. Her current areas of professional interest include academic applications of the new librarianship framework. You might want to talk to us a bit about that. Impact assessment, emerging pathways for STEM, research libraries. Carol is passionate about expanding global roles for academic research libraries and enjoys fostering international library relationships. As the Dean, Carol Smith advocates on behalf of the libraries, positioning the organization as integral partner with the university's academic and administrative units and ensuring the library's continued leadership in advancing research, teaching, inclusivity, and global initiatives. The Dean is instrumental in developing the vision that guides the libraries in service to the university. She also facilitates external relations through outreach and development, engaging donor relations to solidify fundraising efforts. Please help me welcome Carol Smith. Next, we have Brad Allen. He's the director of our local Lawrence Public Library, which has multiple services and programs, and it's just amazing what the public library provides to our community. He's the executive director, has worked in public libraries for over 20 years. He's a native Topeka and Katy graduate. His library took him to the West Coast twice, but he is happy to be back in his adopted home of Lawrence. He also serves as the current board chair for Humanities Kansas, our state humanities council. Please help me welcome Brad Allen. Ray Walling. He is our acting state librarian. He was named acting state librarian by Governor Kelly, June 1st, 2022, and confirmed January 19th, 2023. So he's born in Texas, raised in Pennsylvania. He earned his bachelor's degree with college honors in history from Westminster College and a master's degree from the University of Michigan, specializing in library and information services. After a year working in Michigan's Government Document Center, Walling moved to Kansas to work for Baker University as their electronic services and government documents librarian, and subsequently their director of library services. Tasked with supporting both the information needs of the state government and expanding information access to all Kansans, Walling holds to the original motto of his alma mater, connecting people, information, and technology in more valuable ways through thoughtful leadership. Please help me welcome our state librarian, Ray Walling. Next, we have Julie Mulvihill. She's the Executive Director of Humanities Kansas. Julie is the Executive Director for Humanities Kansas, which is a statewide nonprofit organization that connects Kansas with stories, ideas, and each other to strengthen our communities, our nation's democracy. We're going to learn more about what Humanities Kansas does. Please help me welcome Julie Mulvihill. And we have Saralyn Reece. She has led the Spencer Museum of Art since 2005. As director, she collaborates with staff, artists, KU colleagues, and communities to bring art and people together for a more creative and just future. She was formerly the director of museums and visual arts for the National Endowment for the Arts and the director of the Salina Art Center. Saralyn has served as faculty for the Getty Leadership Program and is an active juror, speaker, trainer, advocate, and art advisor. Her ongoing projects include supporting art and artist projects on the main KU campus in Lawrence and the KU Medical Center in Kansas City. Please help me welcome Saralyn Reece. Okay, and I did notice as I was doing introductions that we have another representative joining us here. We have County Commissioner Karen Willie. Thank you. Karen Willie, please welcome Karen. Okay, we're going to have the discussion and then save a little time for questions from the audience. And I think to start us off, I will ask Ray Walling to talk about the current status of the Institute of Museum and Library Services, the cuts that have been proposed and where we stand, and we'll move on from there.
Okay, so in the president's budget, there was budgeted $6 million to close IMLS in the fiscal year 2026 budget. The Senate Appropriations Committee had their markup session last week, I think it was, and they funded IMLS at $291.8 million, which is $3 million less than the previous year, but not $6 million. So that is just one committee's work in the budget process. We have to wait for the House Appropriations Committee to return from recess to see what they do, see what happens in the full bodies and in conference, but there is a promising sign, I think, with what happened in the Senate last week. The state library is the recipient of the Grants to States program funding. It's approximately 30% of our budget. We use that funding to support statewide databases that are used in K through 12 institutions, as well as higher ed institutions that are available to anyone in the state to use. We also have ebook collections that are funded from that funding, and it also funds the system that manages interlibrary loan that most of our public libraries in the state use. There are a few positions that are funded by this money as well, so it is vital to our operations and support we provide to provide extension services throughout the state.
And Julie, will you talk a bit about the current state of National Endowment for the Humanities and Arts?
Sure, I'll talk specifically about the National Endowment for the Humanities, and maybe Saralyn can talk a little bit about NEA. They're similar in some ways, but different. So Humanities Kansas is a nonprofit organization that receives a federal operating grant every year from the National Endowment for the Humanities to distribute federal funding across our state in support of and to provide resources to communities of all sizes who want to do humanities work. So those are things like museum exhibitions, where we supported one that's opening up here fairly soon at the Wakarusa River Valley Heritage Museum. We support speakers and presentations that the Baldwin City Public Library and Eudora Historical Society use, the Watkins Museum, Lawrence Public Library, all of those types of things. And we do this all across the state. Last year, Humanities Kansas was able to use those federal dollars and some private dollars that we raised to support 488 humanities events all across the state, right? We work with 127 communities across the state, and we usually partner with about 200 different organizations every year. So you might not be familiar with us, but the public libraries and the museums and the historical societies and the art centers and those types of organizations who are looking for financial and other resources to do good things in their communities are often turning to us. So it was a real blow when our federal operating grant was terminated by the Department of government efficiency overnight on April 2nd. We lost $800,000 that night. And it's been a challenge ever since. Now, like Ray said, just like what he's talking about with IMLS, at the federal level, the Senate and the House subcommittees have both met, both of the appropriations committees have met, and there's good news there. They have both included the National Endowment for the Humanities and what they call the federal-state partnership, which is the way in which they allocate those federal grants to the states. We're in both of those budgets. So for the Senate Appropriations Committee, what they did is they said, we'll just do status quo funding of what you received in fiscal year 2024. What you were supposed to receive in fiscal year 2025 is what we'll put in the budget for fiscal year 2026. The House took a slightly different turn, and I'm not savvy enough to know exactly how this worked, but they were working with a different set of numbers that they thought that they needed to fall within in terms of the budget. And so the House numbers are considerably lower for the National Endowment for the Humanities than the Senate appropriations numbers are. So the House numbers, I believe, are about 125 million for the National Endowment for the Humanities. But within that, they actually, strangely enough, put an increase to the state humanities councils, right? Because what we're hearing from the appropriators is they like this idea of the decentralizing of the funds to the states. And so that raises a lot of questions and concerns among the full community of the humanities professionals. If the state councils are well prepared to do whatever we need to do to make sure that those funds are distributed to our partners. One thing that distinguishes us as the State Humanities Council is that we are charged with public humanities. So our work primarily is in the public realm. We don't do very much with K through 12. We don't do very much with higher education, because when the National Endowment for the Humanities is fully and robustly funded, universities and campuses and community colleges and others, tend to be funded through some of the other divisions, where the federal-state partnership, us, funds things like the Watkins Museum of History or the Lawrence Public Library or the Dora Historical Society. Those organizations that tend to be limited in the capacity in terms of being able to apply for a large federal grant. Like Ray said, similar to IMLS, in the president's budget for fiscal year 2026, National Endowment for the Humanities is basically zeroed out. There is a little bit of money in there, and it has been earmarked for closing down the agency. But the House and Senate disagreed with the president's budget, and so we'll wait and see what happens next.
Saralyn, did you want to talk a bit about?
I'm going to zoom out. First of all, thank you all so much for showing up. You don't know how much that means to all of us sitting here. I'd like to look out at you. Saturday morning, 10:30, you're on it. Thank you. I just want, the charge was to talk about the impact. And I want to, I'm not going to give you exactly the numbers for NEA, but I want to talk about the impact. I have had the great pleasure of working for a city, the city of Salina, a nonprofit arts organization. I have worked for the feds at the National Endowment for the Arts, and now I work for KU. I think that's everything but a corporation. But I want to just go down the list of impacts. Federal money ensures accessibility for all. Federal money insists that we are all part of a citizenry, and we get to do it together. Federal money allows for national standards. It allows us to lift out of our local context and say, hey, wonder what Crystal Bridges and the Met are doing. Hey, somebody looked at my grant and they live in Seattle. So it creates that kind of national standard where you have best practices. Much of that comes from that federal network. So standards, networks, and then out of that is always innovation. How your colleagues push you to do more interesting things so that you're not just doing same old, same old. Federal money encourages private investment. Federal money stimulates the individual donor. It has that stamp of approval for federal money for a project. For example, when we redid all of our collection galleries at Spencer Museum of Art, some of you have seen them, they're thematic. Federal money got that started, you finished it. And so that is all part of what federal money does. The impact is not just the money. In fact, in my mind, the most important aspects of federal support, I'm not even going to say money is always the thing, but federal support allows all of these bigger issues to come into play in local communities. So I'm going to speak on behalf of Spencer Museum. We lost $488,000. What that threatens is the reach, the quality, but mostly the accessibility part of our region. We are affected by the National Endowment for the Humanities, because we care about context and history. We're affected by the National Endowment for the Arts. It's our flagship agency. When I worked there, I convened the panels from all over the country who looked at these projects. It was so inspiring. The Institute of Museum and Library Services, and also the Department of Education. All of those agencies have fed into our budgets in the last year. Over a 5-year period, we have received at Spencer Museum of Art approximately $2.7 million from the federal agencies in one way or the other. But I want to close just by saying the impact is the benefit to you and the benefit to our communities. The impact is not an accounting sheet. The impact is kids, children, artists, the public, schools, educators, digital resources, nationally significant exhibitions and programs, and far beyond. The impact is here. The impact is among us. It is not even so much, in my mind, keeping our agencies alive. It is keeping that trust between the public institutions and what our birthright for the arts is. So with that,
And Carol, would you like to visit about, as a dean of libraries at KU?
Sure. First, let me say thank you to everyone for coming out and talking about this topic. It's really heartening to see a full audience coming out on a Saturday morning to talk about funding for libraries and museums. And there is a real need to spread the awareness that you already have. I don't think I fully realized that until a Saturday in June when I found myself on the steps of the Capitol holding a sign supporting libraries. And I was surprised by the number of folks that came up to me, like-minded folks who said, what's going on with libraries? They were very aware of all the things happening everywhere else. But that's the issue with information overload and information noise with everything that's coming at us. Even the most informed citizenry is not necessarily fully aware of what is happening. We just heard about NEH funding and the efforts to shut it down. Let's be really clear here. The same efforts are underway for the IMLS. And of course, we do not go down without a fight. And it's really important that we do everything we can and have all of the tools, use all of the tools that are at our disposal to fight efforts to shut the IMLS down. There are federal efforts, there are a range of state level efforts. State attorneys generals have come together. For goodness sakes, the General Accounting Office has said this is illegal. So, but at the same time, it requires many voices. So you know what the tools are at your disposal, and I know that you are utilizing them. You know, I will say that impacts to IMLS and impacts to NEH are having a devastating effect on public humanities, as you hear, very difficult for public libraries. They do impact academic libraries, not to the same extent and not in the same way. Academic libraries we benefit from access to the exact same databases that are funded by IMLS funds going through the state library as every other library type in the state of Kansas. And yes, faculty, staff, and students are going to suffer from the loss of those databases. But I might widen out and say the impacts of IMLS and NEH are compounded by the other attacks that are taking place that are more directly focused on higher education. The cuts to federal research grants are absolutely devastating for libraries that are supported by the university budgets. Even the F&A funds, these are indirect costs, which are part of federal grants designated to go to the infrastructure that supports the research taking place. Libraries are part of the essential infrastructure for research, and F&A or indirect costs, it's accounting in one regard, but that very much supports academic research libraries. You've probably seen the news in LJ World. This is not theoretical, and this is not in the future. KU has announced hiring freezes. All of the deans were told Monday night about some fairly devastating cuts that we have to work through very quickly. I need to work through very difficult decisions, not being able to do all the things that we need to do for our community. I'll just close out because I like Saralyn, like we could go on forever about this. And this is lovely therapy, so thank you. It really is. But the last thing I want to say is no library, no museum is an island. Okay, we are all part of an interconnected ecosystem. And when you hurt one part of an ecosystem, you know that there are reverberations and it impacts all of the ecosystems. And so I really feel for our public institutions, I feel for our public libraries. The IMLS and NEH cuts are hurting us, not to the same degree, but it is harming knowledge institutions, which harms every single one of us out there. So thank you for this opportunity.
Sure. Hi. Like everyone else, it's so good to see you all here, and I want to thank Kelly for putting this together and asking me to be here. And I want to thank her for inviting Ray and inviting Julie because I thought they could speak more specifically to what is happening with NEH and IMLS. Because I get asked by the paper, how are these affecting the Lawrence Public Library? And the very short answer is not much, because we are so massively locally funded. It is the things that everyone else here has spoken about, these impacts at these larger philosophical levels. It's going to harm small libraries much more. Like Julie and I talk about this all the time, like they're a thought partner. The Lawrence Public Library doesn't rely on Humanities Kansas to survive in our programming. We're lucky enough that we're an urban enough center, we have to do that. We rely on the great programs that they do. We bring them in because they do great programming. But other smaller places are going to be massively affected by that. And I think, the reason that I wanted all of these folks to speak that you may not know as well as me, because I'm your local public library, is these are going to be effects that these organizations that will be disrupted, you won't understand the effect until it's gone. Like Julie and I've talked about that. You'll be like, that really cool book talk that we have in Jack, we're like, why did that stop happening? I don't understand. It's because Humanities Kansas is gone. And their ability to provide these small scale grants is powerful. Like that's the powerful part of the federal state partnership with state humanities councils. You know, the library, some folks, I see Janice here, I see Jan, all the folks who maybe know a little bit more inside baseball about some of the funding that our library's gotten. You know, our library is the size enough that, you know, we had a several $100,000 grant from the NEH, because we could write that. You know, we could write that, and local people supported it, and we got a match. Smaller places don't have that bandwidth, and so seeing how those things go away when you know, like an IMLS grant of $100,000 that we got to help provide internship programs to bring more people that don't normally work in libraries into the profession. You know, those go away, and so. I feel that it's difficult to talk about because it's a quiet destruction of something that I think even almost at times is somewhat symbolic. Like you had the numbers,
Yes.
0.0003% of the federal budget. That, as people said, that's a rounding error. And so when you defund something that's a rounding error, there is serious intention with that. And what I would also say, at the risk of upsetting people, most of what these IMLS and NEH do when it comes to really helping people at the local level is government efficiency. So the audaciousness to suggest that these are inefficient, I wish I had the numbers, I wanted Ray to be here now, the numbers probably changed, but many moons ago with Joanne Butler, the state librarian, and they were talking about the importance of state databases. Ray mentioned that. We use those. We don't pay for those. If that went away, and your guys are more complicated, but Fort Hays State, like it will obliterate Fort Hays State ability to serve their customers. Places that have nursing programs, it will obliterate that. The nursing database goes away. All these things go away, and then everybody will buy them back, right? And they will buy them at a different, more expensive economy of scale. So having 3 million Kansans being the scope of, this maybe is really boring how you buy databases, but it's based on the population, and generally it massively changes. And so when you have a whole bunch of small little groups buying something, the cost to a Kansan is more. What economically conservative person would think that's a good deal? It's nonsense. And so we try to go and speak to people that represent us, that know the power of this, and we hope that we can convince them that these are powerful organizations and they do good work, and they affect every Kansan and every person in every state in this country, and it upsets me to see that the folks that have the least resources will be harmed the most by this. And so while this does not affect the Lawrence Public Library in this massive way, it's a trickle down from what happens with the state, what happens to all these other sister partners that we have, right? And so that's why I'm here as almost more of an advocate, because the Lawrence Public Library will stand despite these attacks on these institutions. So I hope that makes sense, because I find it to be confusing. So I'm really thankful that all of these folks are here to speak much more articulately about this to me. So now we get it to Steve, because they've been messed with.
Thank you, Rick, for that perfect setup. There's.
See, I didn't even swear.
I know, you didn't, which is, it's very polite of you to keep that under control this morning. But there is really a kind of a vast difference in scale of the organizations that are represented here. And I'm really honored to be asked to sit at this table. But there is some commonality across all of us. And I'm gonna speak for organizations that are much more like the Eudora Area Historical Society than they are the State Library System or the Kansas Museum of History. And it's often hard to see how changes like this can impact our organizations. Museums of all scale are really good at presenting a flawless exhibit or an excellent public program and the public engages with that and thinks, wow, I really enjoyed that. That was a wonderful thing to do. And then they walk away and don't think about what else is going on at that museum. What's that metaphor about a duck? You know, those programs are sailing along on the surface. Underneath, the museum is paddling like crazy to make sure that everything we present to the public looks flawless, effortless, perfect, and is completely engaging. And it's that is at risk. And really to kind of understand the impact on the Watkins Museum, I have to let you in on the underside of that duck. And even our building sort of expresses this. We have this amazing structure that looks like it could last forever. Our operating budget is not the same. It takes about $700,000 a year to run the Watkins Museum. Of those resources that are needed, I have a guaranteed $45,000. That's what I earn from my endowment, and that cannot go away unless, of course, the stock market takes it. But I can bank on that every year. Then we get about a third of our budget, about $250,000 from Douglas County public money. Our county administrator is tremendously supportive of local heritage. She recommends our funding stay in the budget every year. Our county commission, thank you, Karen, is also tremendously supportive of heritage in Douglas County. They listen to our needs and they support us by including us in the budget every year. They don't have to do that. We're just part of the general fund, and should something that seems more important to a county commissioner or to the county administrator come along at some point in time, they could say, yeah, you know, that $250,000, I think we'll make it $50,000 this year. Or they could say, you know what, maybe not this year, come back to us again. That would be a huge problem for the Watkins Museum. So I've covered, about a third of where our money comes from. We bring in another third. Part of it is that endowment, but a big chunk of it, actually, our third largest source of support is from membership dues. And the rest of the money that comes in that other third are things that we do that people will pay for. They rent this space. They buy tickets to programs. They take the wonderful bus tours that will be happening in just a couple of weeks during Civil War on the border. Will can fill you in on my tickets. We sell things in our shop. We earn that revenue. The other third of our operating money comes from grants, primarily federal grants. Over the past 5 years, we've received $400,000 in federal grants. Some of that is direct from the IMLS and the NEH, but a lot of that comes from organizations that grant with federal money, like Humanities Kansas, or especially for heritage organizations, the Freedom's Frontier National Heritage Area. Maggie's Garden here along the site exists because of grants from Freedom's Frontier. So the impact that we're feeling, like right now in 2026, isn't all that much. We didn't lose very much in grant funds. We had the final payment of a IMLS grant of about $13,000 that was put at risk. What's at risk is the loss of, or what creates the risk is the loss of opportunity. These federal grants allowed us to do things that we could not do on our own. The third floor core exhibits were funded by an IMLS Museums for America grant. If we have to try to raise that money on our own, a $100,000 or a $200,000 project can take place in a reasonable amount of time if you get a $150,000 federal grant. If you're reliant on $5,000 donations from supportive individuals, you have to raise money for a good long time before you can actually move something forward. The other advantage that these large federal grants pay for us is that they also offset operating expenses. So while we're developing a big exhibit project, some of my time and some of Will's time and some of our curators' time, all the people who are working on the project that money is also supported by those federal grants. So we have been able to develop a means of operation here that allows us to move forward by getting a large grant, offsetting a bunch of operating expenses that then creates a balance forward with the money that we receive from the county that we earn on our own that helps us fill in the holes in our budget in the following year. So we live year to year like that. What we're now facing is a tremendous interruption in that pattern. And the reckoning for us is 2027. This would be the year where we would be looking for one of those big grants that move us forward. So we are looking for lots of other things that can allow us to raise money on a large scale, not on a small scale. And that sounds really depressing. And I don't want to end on a depressing note because this has created a tremendous challenge for organizations like ours. But the other thing it's done is bring forward a wave of collegiality and support that is unbelievable. We are all working together in ways that we never thought we would, or helping each other out with little things in ways that we couldn't have imagined doing in the past. And that's an important legacy of what we're going through right now, because those better relationships between cultural organizations aren't going to change if the funding climate gets better. We have new relationships now that we can all really feel good about.
Steve, if you could just take one more minute to speak a little bit more directly about that Freedom's Frontier. I grew up in Lawrence, and I remember going to the public library when it was Carnegie Library, and the children's section was downstairs. And when we moved back here, the Carnegie Library had Freedom's Frontier, the Heritage Foundation there. How many have noticed their banners are gone? They're not there? Can you just explain to us where they are?
Yes. The Freedom's Frontier is here now. That's the short answer. But just like Humanities Kansas and the IMLS, the National Park Service is going through those same kinds of threats. And the Freedom's Frontier was presented with the possibility that their funding would be erased in 2026. And their director, Lucinda Adams, was looking for ways to sustain the organization with that loss of federal funding. It's they're a little tricky, the National Heritage areas are, because they're authorized as part of the National Park Service, but they are not federal agencies. They're private 501c3s that receive federal money that then they have to match, or they don't receive the full amount of allocation for their federal money. So they do have resources of their own. And Lucinda looked to find a way of preserving the funds that they do have to make the organization last as long as possible, preferably without having to lay off her staff. And they were able to save some resources by ending their lease with the city of Lawrence to office at the Carnegie building. And we said, sure, come on over here. We'll find some opportunities for you. And they sit at that table right over there on 2 days a week. Their mail comes here. We can receive deliveries for them. We actually can serve as a good public face for the heritage areas. Our maps are available upstairs. When people want their National Park Service stamps, we can give them to them with our visitor engagement volunteers up front, and help them with their public face. The city has been an important player in this too. They were the landlords, and they let Freedom's Frontier out of their lease. They are helping to preserve the Grover Barn Underground Railroad historic structure, and they suggested, hey, why don't we take the window banners that tell the history of Lee, Kansas, and install them facing outward so that when people drive by the fire station part of Grover Barn, they can still experience some of that history. There are markers on the grounds, and we encourage people to walk through there. So they're working with us to get those banners out in a place where the public can see them. And this is another like great example of how organizations have come together to make sure that the important work that we do can continue to be done. And Freedom's Frontier, their primary focus right now is to continue to provide grants that fund buses to take students to field trips at historic sites in their 41 county area. That is their primary focus. And they are receiving mixed messages as well, as in terms of what's going to be in their budget for next year. The latest news is that the Senate put their funding in as well. So maybe we're only experiencing short-term setbacks, but it's hard to know. And Brad brought this up, and I hope we get a chance to talk about this a little bit later. But it's not just scary, the kind of threats to operations, but the values and the ideas and the positions that are starting to be put forth. The federal government appears now to be very intent upon determining what history gets told. And those things are kind of shocking for us, but really the next thing that we need to be thinking about, perhaps even more than how much money stays in and how much money stays out, it's how much interference would we need to live with it, and how will our ability to tell the realities of our community stories be affected. We're lucky here in Douglas County. The county commission wants to know how inclusive our programming is and what we're doing to encourage equal access to the museum. That's not the case at the Smithsonian anymore. So I guess I started that conversation, but I will stop it now. In case we have another direction we want to go.
I'm fine with letting you all decide the direction of the panel. That would be a good topic to follow, and I just wanted to be sure we touched on contingency plans, how the public can help, what we can do to show support, attendance, utilizing services, fundraising, and let's just go down the line and everybody speak a little bit about that.
I'm really happy to speak about that because Civil War on the Border is 2 weeks from today. Did I get that right? Well, yes. Yes. So, opportunities if you take the opportunity to buy tickets to some of our events, that is a help. As I mentioned before, our membership, the support we get through membership dues is tremendously important to us. So joining the organization or increasing your membership has immediate impact on our continued operations. And we're also, we're looking to introduce a big fundraising event. This is our 50th anniversary. It feels like it should go out with a bang. And we're planning an event for November 20th. So please watch for that and come and have some fun reliving the 70s with us at the James.
Well, I mentioned earlier that I'm quite sure that all of you know the tools at your disposal to contact your legislators, to write to the White House, to write to SCOTUS. For all it's worth, it's still good therapy. But what I might do is just take a moment to share with you a strategy that you can employ that you might not be aware of with respect to supporting libraries. We all know the power of stories, right? We can talk about numbers, but it's the stories of actual impact to individuals and institutions that resonate and get the attention of decision makers, And so I do try to talk as much as possible about actual impact. I will share one actual impact to Cape libraries that is extremely distressing to all of us. We have had the benefit of a recurring NEH grant over many years that we're very proud of, wherein we work with students from historically Black colleges and universities to pair them with a preservationist, a librarian working in conservation services, and introduce them to the discipline, hopefully encouraging them to pursue it as a profession. If, librarianship is not a diverse profession, and it is not going to become more representative of the people that it purports to tell the stories of unless we take proactive action. If you have been raised in the community in a family where you haven't had as much access to libraries and museums, you're not going to know what they can do, and you're not going to be inspired to make that part of your life as well. And so working with young people and demonstrating how this could be your life is extremely important. And we are all, in March or April, we got the email shortly after NEH got their email telling us that program was shut down, and we had just won another award to renew it. So that's a story of real impact that hits close to home for us and our mission. But I want to share with you that the American Library Association has a wonderful program called Share Your Story. Very easy to find, just Google it. And literally this is a way for every citizen to easily and readily communicate a story, a real world story about how libraries and museums have benefited you, benefited your community, how they have impacted your lives. If every member in this room just went to that web form and shared that story, they're going to get heard. And every library is a wonderful organization. Check them out.
They are. I was just reading their mays and shalls from the IMLS on the statutory requirements from the executive order, because it does say that they should continue with statutory requirements of the organization, of which several of the things IMLS does are statutory. So anyway, they did a good summation of that. It was way easier than reading the US code, which I tried to do this morning. I didn't have enough coffee. I think when Carol was talking, it reminded me of an email that Ray sent out yesterday that maybe it seems to make some sense. The Second Lady of the United States just issued a federal summer reading challenge, talking about the importance of reading and your imagination and being literate and all of these things that seem to align very much with the IMLS and NEH. Kids are like right then, they've got a form, she's talking about the importance of all these things. And so, how do we figure out some way that, who doesn't agree that these are important things? And how do we find voices that aren't, what am I trying to say? Sometimes it feels like some people might not listen to you based on where you're from and their conceptions of who you are based on where you're from, like Lawrence, Kansas. And so, do you know people who live other places that aren't Lawrence, Kansas? You should have them call their congressional people. You have 10 chapters. I hate to talk about strategy so openly being recorded by two different people, but we are all divided, right? Sadly, our world has become divided for all different kinds of reasons, based on our attention span, based on just being obliterated and not really. How many of you think as deeply as you did 10 years ago? My reason is not just because I have a 7-year-old. Like, something very serious is happening. You gotta go on Hari, come and talk about this. And his book, Stolen Focus. These are huge issues. And so we are becoming divided, and we all know that people aren't as divided as we have become in social media channels or on YouTube or whatever. And so how do we really talk about the fundamental importance of these things, and also be careful to not, inadvertently weaponize the way in which you talk about them to people that maybe disagree with you. Maybe I shouldn't say that so explicitly, but I worry that, we're not really going to find any common ground if we don't find ways to talk about things that are universal and true without corrupting them with a culture war. I was stunned to watch this video. I shouldn't say I was stunned. See, there's my prejudice right there, right? I just showed you my prejudice. Like, seeing the Second Lady talk about the importance of libraries and the importance of reading. They're going to give them low prizes and come to, and it's like, I felt myself maybe being like, don't, they're just collected books that you read for a day. It's like, that's terrible to think in that manner, right? They're trying to support these things. And so I guess what I'm saying is, how do we all decide that these are important things, and how do we tell that story in a broader way that we all understand that this is important for our nation and for all of our communities? I mean, the other thing that I would say is, again, I'm just really thankful to Kelly that we could have Ray here to speak, and that, you just might not know what the state library does for you and what it does for the Lawrence Public Library and what Humanities Kansas does for public libraries and museums. Both of these and like things that happen and just what happens with the way that you're affected by the federal government. So, I just want people to understand like the ways that they can support all these organizations and even understand what they are and the impact that they are having. So, yeah, use those methods that you have.
So going off of the email I sent yesterday to the library community, I think we have to look for opportunities to build bridges with the administration where possible. Obviously, literacy is incredibly important to them and important to libraries and important to all of us. And this opportunity to promote and remind people of this important summer reading challenge that the Second Lady has developed as her first initiative gives us an opportunity to build a bridge to say, yes, we can help support this initiative by what we do in our daily work. We already do summer reading programs and
you can double dip. You can double dip.
Let's start in the summer.
But it just gives us an opportunity to then say, well, let's work on next year. Let's think about how we can work together next year. Let's also remind you that we're here because the federal government provides funding. Our funding for the summer reading program comes from the I Am Less grant. So it's opened opportunities for dialogue between state librarians and the Second Lady's office, which I think is a very good thing. But I think there's something else that I want to mention that's being kind of lost. I'm going to go away from the federal topic for a second, but state funding for libraries has also been challenging. And we've seen in Indiana and Missouri and I can't remember at the moment, that they've had to cut significant amount of resources because of state funding, not federal funding. In the case of Kansas, in 2000, we had $2.7 million, over $2.7 million of state funding that went to public libraries in state aid. This past session, unfortunately, we've declined over the last 25 years. Until last session, it was hovering about $1 million in state aid to public libraries. This past year, we were able to increase it to $1.8 million. So that was a significant increase and something that also allowed us to give $1,000 to every single library in the state. And the vast majority of our libraries are small libraries serving populations under 2,500 people. So I think it was an incredibly important decision the legislature made to basically fund and implement that change to state aid. Unfortunately, this last session, $486,000 of that increase was cut. I think it's important to recognize that the governor, both years, the past 2 years, has supported state libraries' recommendation of significant increases in state aid for public libraries. But also, the Senate this past session also has taken a strong, uniform position of supporting state aid as well. So we have some work to do in the House next session. But it's not just supporting public libraries. I would be remiss if I didn't mention it also supports the regional systems of cooperating libraries that support all of our libraries in the state and create efficiencies in what they do day to day. So I just wanted to mention that because I think it's something that's being lost. Our focus has been on federal dollars ever since March 14th, but there's something else going on in the background that we can deal with.
So years ago, I was at an event with Kansas historian Craig Miner. And Craig was talking about his most recent book at the time, which was called Seeding Civil War, Kansas in the National News, 1854 to 1858. And everybody in this room knows what that time period is.
Or you can find out a little bit more about it.
That's right, that's right. So during that presentation, Craig was talking about how at the time, the newspapers, and this is really what the focus of his book was about, is how were newspapers reporting on Kansas territory and what was happening. And Craig said during that presentation that at the time, Kansans were loud and they were confident and they were in that national spotlight. And newspapers on the East Coast were reporting on the fractures happening across the United States and happening right here in the territory, reporting on a civilization that they were characterizing as a war of religions, of races, of factions and fanatics. And I wrote this down at the time, and I have this little slip of paper that I still have on my desk. And he quoted this New Orleans newspaper who said it like this: "The nation heaves and sways and tosses uneasily under the weight of its destiny. Could freedom prosper amid the shock of continuous collisions among citizens? Is our culture and our education adequate for the challenges of freedom and self-governance?" Right? So this is what was being written in 1854, and it's such a great quote to revisit in this time. And at that presentation, Craig said, you know what, the answer is yes, we are up to the challenge. And why? Because of the humanities, right? Because the humanities, art and literature and history and culture and traditions, all of those things give us the ability to imagine something different, to expand the way that we to think differently, to talk differently about those things that matter. And so I think that when we think about what are our next steps moving forward and how do we respond to these challenges that are happening, to the very idea of funding and public support for the arts and humanities, for libraries, for museums and all of that, I would say, yes, you absolutely still should be calling and reaching out to your members of Congress. They're the ones who can make a difference, or to your state legislators, right? And absolutely to Saralyn and everybody else's comments too, this is the time for you to put your money where your mouth is and sign up for those bus tours and attend those beautiful exhibit happenings at the Spencer Museum of Art, to go to the book sale at the Lawrence Public Library, and all those things that you can do in your thing. And if you have a little spare time, I'm just going to put in a plug for Humanities in Kansas, right? Because we do rely on federal funds. We are not a state agency. We don't get state funding. We don't belong to any city, municipality. We don't belong to any county, right? We are a 501c3. And so we are doing our very best to outlast the chaos. And so I hope you'll join us in our endeavor, because we know that we make a difference in our state. In the founding legislation of the National Act that created the National Endowment for the Arts and its sister endowment, the National Endowment for the Humanities. In that founding legislation in 1965, it says, democracy demands wisdom and vision in its citizens. And I think those of you here in this room and who are listening and watching, we have to really take that to heart. That's an incredible call to action for all of us to take every day, and perhaps especially now.
There is absolutely no reason to say much else. It's just so beautifully put. But I want to swing back to a couple of things that I was hearing as we were going down the panel. The collegiality, the need for creativity. Just want to say arts, 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 because we've got, that's about innovation, that's creativity. Long ago, when I was a very fresh, young director of the Salina Arts Center, one of my donors came into me and said, Saralyn, there are two ways that you know who people are. You look at their calendar and you look at their checkbook. And I won't reveal this person, but that person's family is still around doing good work. There is no substitute for federal funding. I want to say that right away, to say that the investment of federal funding is critical to all the things that Julie is talking about. There is no substitute. However, If we take the long view, please join the Watkins Museum. Please join the libraries. Please think of all of us in your estate planning. This is a real moment for that. What if we could get that $45,000? Did I hear that right?
400,000.
No, in your endowment.
Oh, with my endowment, oh, yes, my 40.
From your endowment.
Yes.
So you look at that every year and it's a lot more. You still need federal funds. But I would just implore all of you to keep doing what you're doing this morning, show up. And also give to us. And give to all of us. And we will pledge to give back to you. That's what we can do. So I think that, just bringing it home, that's how we can help.
If I could leap in on there at the end, because that's still working. Yeah, I got it. But Saralyn, you said something that we think about all the time, but we don't often externalize. But we do exist for you guys. That's really all we think about, is how can we serve our communities? Where are their needs? We get a lot of personal reward, not from cataloging a bunch of artifacts, but for putting those artifacts in a way that it gives people insights or knows that we're preserving something important about our community. We're always thinking in an outward focused way. And I don't know what your grant termination letters were like, but in the letter we got from the IMLS, we were told that it was determined that our project no longer met the interests of the United States. So, they weren't just interested in, just saying, sorry, we're not gonna give you any money. They wanted to send a message about the kinds of things that we do. And I think that the efforts that the public takes to show that humanities and arts and cultural expression are in the interests of the people of this country, who is actually the United States, not the government, that can begin to influence decision-making in a different kind of way. So you really do need to speak up and share those opinions in editorials in the newspaper, by going to concerts, by writing to your legislators. It's really up to the people to show that the stuff that our organizations do is important in American life. If you can't tell, that those words are still kind of burned in my
Okay, I'm just going to pass on a few facts. Alexandra Middlewood wrote an article, What Kansas Towns Will Lose as President Trump Cuts Library Funding. It was published April 6, 2025. I'm not against librarians. I need to document and cite my sources. In the Topeka Capital Journal. And she said that Kansas ranks second in the nation for per capita library visits. Is that well documented? Highlighting the importance of libraries as community hubs for learning and access to resources. Personal story, my mother lives in Baldwin. She's 87 years old. A few weeks ago, I took her down to the Baldwin Public Library and renewed her library card. And my intent was helping her get a book about Susan B. Anthony. But she read that a little bit. But come to find out, the Baldwin Library is giving away free books by a local citizen, Catherine Berg-Graziano, who's written about Baker Lands, the struggle to start a school in a town on the Santa Fe Trail. And my mother got a free book from her public library. Lisa LaFountain was invited but was unable to attend today. So we are thinking about our local libraries, our small libraries, and what they do for for the people. Besides the summer reading program, libraries provide access to books for people with disabilities, such as the Talking Books program, Braille, and large print books. They provide resource sharing through Kansas Library Catalog, the interlibrary system. We know about Libby. State access to digital collections of ebooks and audiobooks, that's Libby, and Kansas Digital Books programs. And I wanted to read something from the IMLS Office of Museum Services Funding. The Institute of Museum and Library Services is the primary federal agency responsible for helping museums connect people to information and ideas. Its office supports all types of museums, including aquariums, arboretums, art museums, botanical gardens, children's museums, culturally specific museums, historic sites, history museums, military museums, natural history museums, nature centers, planetariums, railway museums, science and technology centers, zoos, and more. That's just chilling to think about cuts that would be impacting all of those organizations. I'm going to take a few minutes now. We're going to have questions from the audience. If you have a question, just raise your hand. I'll come around, and then we'll have a final word from the panelists. Anyone with a question? Make it through here. Say your name.
My name is Susanna Clement. I'm curious, are you planning to share what the letter said about no longer being relevant with your users? You told it to us. Are you going to put a sign up and let everybody know?
You know, we did. We did share that, I think, in our newsletter to our members. Will, you remember? Yeah.
And with the local press too.
That's right. Yes, we also shared it in a press release.
You made it to Facebook.
That's good to know.
Anyone else? Any questions?
I think I can speak loud enough for the room and for the people at home. I'm right next to the camera. Brad spoke about the need to find common ground with people in other areas. And this question is for Julie, though, because as a member of the Speakers Bureau, I know this firsthand, but there are very definite benefits to these programs like the Speakers Bureau that go into, especially in the smaller communities around the state, that go beyond, you know, the speaker imparting knowledge about a specific humanities topic. So could you talk about what those benefits to these, especially smaller communities, are of programs like that and how they are affected by the federal cuts?
That's right. So Will is talking about, we have a very robust Speakers Bureau, right? So we have historians like Will from all over the state who are part of this catalog. And these presentations are free for organizations within that nonprofit cultural sector to use. And so, you know, Will goes out and travels all over the state talking about the Civil War in Kansas, right? And organizations that use these resources are often small, they're often rural. 62% of everything we do is in those rural communities, right? And Ray and Brad can talk about this too. They're often done in public libraries, they're often done in museums and historical societies. And these organizations are often under-resourced, not financially, but people-wise too, right? You know, they might be an all-volunteer organization, they might have one person that is a paid staff. And so the benefit for those communities to have someone like Will, who is so knowledgeable in that area, or Megan Comiskey, who can talk about, you know, poetry and nature, or, you know, we have all sorts of different topics, you know, Beverly Buller talking about, you know, the KKK in Kansas and William Allen White's response and so on and so forth. Those organizations get an opportunity to be at the table, to have access to professional historians, scholars, literature professors, whoever it might be, KU, K-State, Fort Hays State, very generous. A lot of retired faculty want to be part of this. It is a movement of ideas that we talk about around the state, right? You know, Will can present his information. The Jetmore Public Library will have something to say about that, and Will can think about that, and then the next time he gives that presentation in Goodland or Hiawatha or Council Grove, he's taken that storyline from Jetmore with them. And like I said, we call it that movement of ideas where Kansans get together and connect with stories and ideas and one another, and it strengthens those people's connections with everyone in that room. It strengthens their communities, and we also believe that it's good for our nation's democracy. This is a time when people need to come together, not stay apart. So when we talk about the loss of federal funding for us, because we rely so heavily on it, we've had to cancel some of those things. So we have preserved the Speakers Bureau because it's the #1 way that we get across the state, and it's an efficient and effective way to distribute our resources, and it ticks every box. What we've had to cancel are things like the Talk Book Discussion Program, which the Baldwin Public Library is one of our super fans. They use our series of books and our discussion leaders, for 5 or 6 months out of the year. They do a monthly book discussion. We help underwrite opportunities for them to bring in skilled discussion leaders to talk about these books. That program has had to go on hiatus. Who is carrying that burden? It's not the Lawrence Public Library, it's the Baldwin City Public Library, it's the Goodland Public Library, it's the Council Grove Public Library, it's those small libraries who don't have the resources for a programming budget in their communities. We've had to put on hold our Humanities for All grants. These are not huge NEH grants. You can't get $100,000 from Humanities Kansas, but you can get $15,000, right? And those have had to go on pause too. These are funds that support small exhibits. They support symposiums. They support things that organizations in your hometown tell us are important to you. You create it yourself, you bring it forward to us, and we are like, that is an incredible idea of humanity. It's all about innovation and creativity, and those have had to be paused for the remainder of the fiscal year. We don't know what it looks like for fiscal year 2026 yet until we see what happens. But that is such a real shame, and these projects, to Will's point, not only leverage innovation and creativity, but they also leverage leverage local, input. We have to match everything that's given, provided by the National Endowment has to be matched dollar for dollar. And these local communities step up to the plate and do it, right? And so this is just a really incredible, like I said, it's a movement of ideas. We need more of it, not less of it. And we're just really grateful for people like Will who are willing to spend some evenings and weekends traveling across the state on our behalf, but really on behalf of history and heritage and humanities and ideas and stories.
Okay, I think we're ready for final comments, final takeaways, and I want to remind people over at our Women for Kansas table, we've got free postcards and contact information for your legislators at the national level, and Spencer Art Museum also donated some postcards. So final comments, what do we have to remember?
Well, my final comment is that what we need to remember is that collectively we have power. It's easy to forget about that, especially if you pay a lot of attention to the news. But by the actions that we take, with the organizations we support, with the opinions that we express, we can shape the country that we want to live in. Our organizations help to do that kind of thing, but we really need you to be involved in order to make that a reality.
I think I'll leave you with 2 thoughts. One, I want to underscore something that you heard quite a bit about today, which is that the rural libraries are going to be disproportionately impacted by these cuts. And I'm going to tie that to something that I said earlier about K-12 libraries, museums of all types being interconnected as an ecosystem. That's true of Kansas as well. No one town is an island unto itself. Kansas is a broader community, and we are only as strong as how we take care of those that are most in need. And I share that with you because we are here in Lawrence in a relative position of privilege. You heard Brad say, LPL is probably going to be okay. And that means that we might not necessarily see and feel the impact. So please, as you're going out and taking action, give some thought to the fact that we might be relatively okay here, but the impacts in the smaller parts of the state, we're a very rural state, are going to be very real and very devastating. The second thing I will leave you with, and I hope it's not too depressing, but I've been spending a lot of time thinking about 16th century monks and Henry VIII. And I've been thinking about the monks in those monasteries, and many of us have had the privilege of walking amongst the ruins. I'll bet you those monks were like, he can't do that to us. He can't do that to us. That's not going to happen. And we all know how history unfolded. So, Julie mentioned outlasting the chaos. I think right now we are all hoping that we can outlast the chaos. We don't know if we're going to outlast the chaos. We don't know how long the chaos is going to last. Let's outlast it, but let's also fight it. Yes.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would mainly echo a lot of what Carol said, what a lot of folks have said, the impact, this impact really of these federal dollars. I mean, what did the feds build? Phone lines to places that it is not economically feasible to build them, broadband, library, all these things, right? And these are a manifestation of that. And I can say, like, one of my favorite things about being on the Humanities Kansas board is I've learned way more about this state. I grew up in Topeka, I went to KU, I lived in Lawrence, drove through Western Kansas to get to Southern Colorado as a youth. And so, but I didn't really know a lot about this state. And it's a great state. And there are great people throughout the state, everywhere I go, and all of the people that I've seen doing amazing, powerful, wonderful things in their communities. These types of institutions that support that, those things are massively at risk. The intellectual and cultural vibrance of Hayes, Garden City, I don't know why we always say Jetmore, this city. But Ladera's have a great library in Jetmore, that's why. But at any rate, creativity, caring about this country, caring about intellectual curiosity and culture, it lives everywhere throughout this state, and that is massively at risk. And we need to remember that. And how do we start to have conversations again to remind ourselves, we are not so divided as we think that we are. And it has just been beautiful to travel. It's actually a way more beautiful state than I realized as well, but it's like, this whole state is vibrant, and these institutions support that in a really critical manner.
So listening to everyone up here, I'm reminded of a visit I did to the Russell Public Library. And the mayor happened to come to this library visit, and he was surprised I came out there because so often people out in the state feel like they're forgotten. They say West Kansas used to be anything west of Hayes, and then it was Salina, and now he feels it's like anything west of Wanamaker Road in Topeka. But but I think what it illustrates, what's been mentioned multiple times here, is this is going to have a significant impact on those communities. It might not be as devastating for Lawrence and our larger communities in the state, but we have to remember that we have a broad set of community sizes throughout the state, and that we need to think about ways to retain and continue to support the library ecosystem that we've developed. I think if you look at Kansas statute, if you're that board, you'll see there's all sorts of ways to form a library in the state. And it gets kind of complex, to be honest with you, but I think the intent of the legislature and the supporters of libraries was we want any community to be able to form a library and to be able to support it and be successful and support the community. And we have in statute the ability and the requirement of the state library to provide statewide resources to support all Kansas. We have the regional systems to support all communities and libraries in the state. We've created this great thing in Kansas, and that's what's at risk, I think, in the current situation, both federally and in the state.
One of our board members is the president of the Salina Chamber of Commerce, and Renee often talks to me about how arts and culture are really at the heart of her work in terms of workforce development and retention. So arts and culture, libraries, museums, historical societies, all of this, we are an economic driver in our state. It's part of the tourism industry, but it is part of that piece of a community that makes people want to live here, it makes people want to visit here, it makes people want to spend time and dollars here. So strong libraries, strong museums, strong historical societies, all of this makes this something that is good for our state and good for our nation. So there is also, I will leave it to you, it's not just a philosophical argument, there is an economic argument about this piece as well.
So I think Brad maybe said this very well in the very beginning, but expand your minds. I would like to leave you with the fact that you can pick up these postcards, but you can go up to that Spencer Museum and see something every day of the week that's come to us from another time, and you could stand this close to it, and you can learn. So read deeply, expand your minds, take advantage of us, because you are the exemplars of the citizens of the future. And so I'll leave it there. You know, we need to be that expanded citizen. And so thank you so much, Kelly. It was great to be here.
Well, thank you all. I do urge you to visit Spencer. They've got a sense of humor down there when you come in. The first display is called Hot as Hell.
There's free parking too.
Yeah, free parking, go down to the first level. So, and then also for what Ray was talking about, I believe there's a brand new effort, an effort to create a brand new library. Perry LeCompton is trying to start a library. They've been in a hallway or something. And anyway, they're looking at that effort. So we want to continue to grow, not recede. And I appreciate all of you, your time, your efforts, and hope it was good therapy. So everyone, just let's keep on. We're not giving up, we're not giving in, and let's keep on, and we'll all do what we can. Thank you all for turning out, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.